Well, for those of you who don't know, my name is Christy. I am Eden's TA for this class. So if you have any questions for her, by all means, feel free to email her. But I really am the point person for our class today. So first, I kind of am going to apologize in advance because I know the sound in here is a little insane. So I want to play you guys this clip, and I promise if it's loud, I'll pause it and we'll fix it. Oh, I see a hand. Yes. Oh, I did publish it before class. Let me take a quick look. But while I'm doing that, what song is that? And who's it by? Green Bay. Do you guys like that song? Yeah, it's like super catchy, super great. But I wanted to start out with that song by Beyonce. So you guys like that song. Does it make you feel, what does it make you feel? Does it make you feel good about yourself? Have you guys seen the music video? Okay, so the music video is kind of intense. I was going to show it to you guys, but I encourage you to look at it after class. And I also encourage you guys to look at the lyrics of the songs that you guys think are the most popular. Because sometimes a song is super catchy and we're really into it, but the lyrics are actually pretty pejorative. So this song in particular, you can even see Beyonce using her sexuality to try and kind of get what she wants, or say, I can be very persuasive when I want to be. So just think about the lyrics, and I really just thought that was I love this song too. I find it empowering. I found the video a little intense, but mainly I think it's a really cool way to get this lecture started off, because we're talking about gender attitudes today. So before I really dive in, I just want to tell you guys two things. I know you guys have a textbook. I believe that you read your textbook when you want to, and I hate lecturing from the textbook. I think it's super boring. So while I took detailed notes on the text, and I will be using that to guide this lecture, I'm going to try and supplement it with things that you guys find interesting. And I will be sure to let Eden know what we spend the most time on. So I would encourage you guys, for the sake of prepping for the test, to try and focus on what we're talking about in class. If there are parts of the chapter that are intrinsically interesting to you, I also encourage you guys to focus on those, because sometimes those are great areas to focus on for the short answers for the tests. So we've done our awesome Beyonce clip, which is just a great way to start, I think. Okay, so do you guys see these advertisements? These are from like the 1940s. And what strikes you immediately? Yeah. They switched the genders. Yeah, so this is an artist who just actually published these in 2018. And what he did is he took these real old-fashioned advertisements from the 1940s and swapped the gender. And if you look at this PowerPoint, I'm not going to go into great detail on it right now, but the descriptions are pretty gender pejorative, and it's pretty hilarious when you swap the genders. Now, this is not the first time that I've seen an artist or someone take, say, advertisements, like feminine clothing advertisements, and put men in the position of the model, so you can see just how ludicrous it is when we try and focus our attention on men's bodies in the same way that we do women's. But I thought this was a really good example of kind of the 2018 perspective on these more traditional gender roles. And here are two more. You need a man can open it, get out of the kitchen, and they're just kind of ludicrous in sort of a hilarious way. So I wanted to kind of bring those into the conversation, because we're going to be talking about egalitarian roles and more traditional gender roles, and I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on those. I think there's something really implicit in these attitudes that are really interesting, that are going to guide our conversation today. Now, I know Eden asked you guys to complete the implicit association test. Did some of you guys have a chance to do that already? Cool. What were some of your reactions from doing that?
Oh, I did the one with this, like, women in science.
Okay.
And I kept making, like, whenever I would make mistakes, I'd be like, no, like, I knew as soon as I made a mistake and it was, like, the way they wanted it, you know, like, the bias, I was like, damn it, I'm doing that because it's my implicit gender bias, but.
Did you score one way or another?
I was moderately biased.
Moderately
I was
biased.
pissed at myself.
I was like strongly biased, so you're in good company. Did anyone else do someone that was different than gender and STEM? Yeah.
I did the workplace one.
That's the same one I did.
I thought it was interesting that at the end they asked you, like, to what extent do you agree that this, like, that these are your views?
Oh.
So, like, because I'm sure no one's going to say, like, if someone got the opposite of what they thought they were going to get, no one's going to really say, like, yes, I am gender biased. But I thought that was just an interesting question that they added in at the end.
I totally agree. So it's really funny because, you know, I study this and I feel like I have very strong pro-woman views, and yet I was like strongly biased on this gender career IAT, and if you haven't had a chance to do it yet, you really should do it before the test because I'm sure there'll be questions about it. And just it's a really interesting exercise to go through if you find this topic interesting. But it kind of measures your response time and it crosses what you might associate, say, male or female with like career or family. And so you have to pay attention to the words that fit in each category, even if they're paired with, say, a gender adjective that doesn't match what you might implicitly assume. And I was like, oh, whatever, this is gonna be so easy. And I was so much faster for like the woman family when they were aligned than when they were misaligned. And it just kind of goes to show it doesn't really matter. Like, you can be aware, you can study it, you can have pretty strong beliefs, but these gender stereotypes are really inculcated in us from a really young age, and it's hard to remove yourself from them. So we'll talk about the IIT a little bit more. One more thing before we really dive in that I wanted to tell you about. So there have been a lot of articles on maternity and paternity leave, both internationally and in the US. And this is a really interesting article that I read last year, and it's from the Wall Street Journal. And it talks about how millennials and sort of the younger generation, you think you ask people before they have families what their views are like. And they're like, oh yeah, we're really egalitarian. We think women and men should absolutely split the caretaking duties. And it's just a very non-traditional perspective on how they should want to raise their families. But if you actually check back in with millennials who have started having families, they report a division of responsibility in labor that is not at all different from their predecessors of like the baby boomers or 20 to 30 years prior. And it's kind of amazing to think about the obstacles in the workplace that lead us to these natural gender divisions. So is it easier for women to request flex time? And are they more likely to get it, particularly if they're not in a high-powered career? Well, a lot of the research in this chapter that we're going to talk about today says yes, it's actually easier for women to request flex time if they're in a high-status job than it is for men. And it's this mismatch in our expectations that we have for the different genders. So I really encourage you to read this article. It's a really interesting read. I kind of focused on the division of labor, but there are other aspects for career that are pretty relevant. So we're going to talk a little bit today about ideologies, measures, which I think are really interesting and important. And I'm going to try and convince you why I think they should be interesting and important to you. And then we're going to kind of let you guys chime in and sort of guide where we go. So I have a lot of slides, and I don't expect that we're going to get through all of them. So I'd like you guys to jump in if you see something interesting and share your thoughts. So that way we spend our time on things that you guys find intrinsically interesting, and we're not spending time on definitions that are kind of pedantic. So the first, now that I said that, I'm going to tell you like 3 definitions. These actually are important to know. So your book talks about gender ideology. It talks about this traditional gender ideology, so men's spheres work and women's spheres in the home. And there's this implicit assumption that men have greater power than women So this is sort of aligned with what I was talking about with, you know, the expectations of 30 or 40 years ago, that women do the majority of the caretaking. And then we're sort of shifting more towards this egalitarian gender ideology. So the power is equally distributed between women and men, which could mean that they equally identify with both work and family spheres. And then there's sort of this transitional gender attitude that I think a lot of people can identify with, which is, okay, it's fine that women devote energy to work and family, but women should hold proportionally more responsibility for the home, and men should proportionally spend more of their energy on work. And if you think about how we divide chores, do you find in your own experiences that your moms are like the ones who are mowing the yard and like raking the leaves? So I see no's. I'm sure that there are some exceptions. I was giving a job talk at Pepperdine University last semester, and I had two people who were like, that is not the way it is in my house. And I was like, you are the exception to the rule, good for you. But in a lot of houses, that's really how it is, and the women gravitate more towards the dishes and the laundry and the more gender traditional roles. And if that's happening in the schema of our own family, even when both parents work, it's pretty easy to see how that reinforces itself over our lives. So that's really what I want you to take away from that. So the book talks, I'm going to highlight about 5 studies, 3 of which are in the book and 2 or 3 of which are not. This one I think is a great one because it's where the book starts out. Snyder, Tank, and Burch died in 1977. I give you a quick overview. Did this stick out to any of you guys? Did you think that this study was kind of interesting? So just by manipulating the picture that these male participants saw, they gravitated towards the individual that they were hearing audibly, that was a woman, towards the one with the more attractive picture. And it's sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy, because you think someone's more attractive, then you're nicer, you're like spending more time, you're listening to their responses, so then they like you more. And so it's sort of this cycle that's reinforcing. And I think this is a really interesting study because it was the same female, both conditions. This is not a picture that was taken in these conditions, but I thought it was great because it was a great example of how you can look great with one expression and really unattractive with another. And this is the idea that the individuals were their own controls. And so the woman actually reported that the men were kinder when she was in the more attractive condition. So I'm gonna sort of stretch you, I'm not really gonna stretch you guys that much, but I have another pet peeve, and it's secondary sources. So I absolutely hate to get my information from secondary sources. I think they can point you to interesting things, but I see absolutely no reason to rely on what someone said, someone else said, that someone else said, when you can just go to the original source. So I wanna show you guys a few scales, because I think it's much easier to understand what these scales are and sort of what they're talking about when you actually visit them.